Alright buddy, well welcome back to another gaming video. It's been a while since I last had a video. Last time we saw one here on the channel, this little guy wasn't born yet, so say hello to the littlest gaming hermit right here. So we're going back into the series we've been taking a look at as far as what could have been on the Sega Dreamcast, and that's games that could have happened. Specifically, let's take a look at some PC games I think that would made for great additions to the Dreamcast library. Certainly there were games that were developed on the Dreamcast, built with various gaming engines such as the Quake or Unreal engines. Certainly we see those a lot with first-person shooters, also third-person adventure games and shooters. So we're going to take a look at other games during the era that I think will make great additions to Dreamcast library. Perhaps there's some of those that you played either on other platforms, including PC, and you think maybe it would be great if we would have seen that on the Dreamcast. So let's take a look to see, and tell me what you think as far as your experiences, and think if it would have been a great addition to the library. Alright, let's go take a look. You ready to take a look? Oh, Daddy's boring? Okay.
What is it like?
Alright, starting with our first video, we're taking a look at Looking Glass, released in 1999, a great first-person action RPG built upon the Dark engine, which is none other than System Shock 2. A lot of folks look at this game as being like the forerunner to the Half-Life series, but certainly as far as it didn't get as much publicity and attention in comparison to Half-Life, but still though, there's a lot of fans for this game, so much so that Night Dive Studios ended up acquiring the rights to this game so they can do a re-release with improved graphics. This is what we're actually seeing here. But I think this has been a fantastic release for the Dreamcast. Although a little bit older in comparison to when the Dreamcast released, this is Blizzard's 1997 masterpiece, Diablo. So certainly as far as a lot of games have been built upon the Diablo aesthetic. Certainly as far as the Dreamcast was not a system that did not have something similar to this in the pretty much unheralded, under-the-radar RPG Record of Lodoss War. But certainly as far as I think, the Dreamcast would have been a great system to have this just because it had all the tools needed. Certainly great interface, could have had mouse and keyboard options, could have also used a controller because they did a great job with Record of Lodoss War using a good map scheme to be able to do all the functions needed for a game like this to run successfully. Not to be outdone, certainly would have been Blizzard's 2000 sequel, Diablo 2. Certainly looking at the graphics, we can see as far as Diablo 1, Diablo 2, something in the middle is kind of like what we had with Record of Lodoss War. And I think definitely as far as Diablo 1, Diablo 2 were great sellers, and I think both games could definitely have had a place on the Dreamcast. It definitely was soul planning. I could imagine certainly like a Diablo-themed Dreamcast. Certainly, it's really unfortunate that we can't have had that back in the days. It would have been a great addition. Saying the start theme, certainly we're looking at Raven Software's 1994 game Heretic. So a lot of people don't know a whole lot about Heretic, but Raven Software worked really closely with the folks at id Software who made Doom. So this runs on the Doom engine, and as you can see, it plays different, but it looks very similar to Doom. What I really like about it is just simply it had different ambiance to it, definitely neat design. And if you've played Heretic, definitely there's a lot more, I don't know what to say, oomph to it. Like the sound design, I think is just really neat, and I think it's been a great addition for the system. Not to forget about its sequel, Hex II, which was also built upon the Doom engine. So back during the mid-90s, Heretic came out in 94, Raven Software followed that up with Hex II in 1995, just like we have seen with Doom 1, and then followed by Doom 2. So certainly it has a similar look to Heretic, but a little different, but still staying with that same dark, medieval-looking theme. So certainly as far as, again, great sound, great graphics, definitely different look to what we had seen beforehand. id Software did a great job showing us what it would like to be McGee Blazkowicz going through in Wolfenstein. We got to be Space Marines in Diablo going through the Mars colony, and certainly the storming the gates of hell. But certainly as far as Heretic, Hex II, Raven Software really hit it on the head. Say the first person shooters, following the Doom engine, we have the Build engine. So definitely late 90s we saw 3D Realms doing great work, and this was really evident with Shadow Warrior. So in the PC video previously, we saw Duke Nukem 3D, and back in the late 90s, Shadow Warrior was its next follow-up. Certainly a great game if you happen to play on the PC. I definitely enjoyed it quite a bit, and it actually built upon the Doom engine, even more advances than was there beforehand, and arguably better graphics. Unfortunately, it didn't really have a lot of the following that Duke Nukem 3D had, but certainly as far as based upon gameplay, it had it in bunches. Following the release of the Build engine, we saw id Software come back even stronger, even better, with their very own Quake-based engine. So the first game that id Software released with this was certainly Quake 1, and Raven Software, their friends in Wisconsin, came out with Hex II back in 1997. So definitely stay with that same dark, medieval, cultic look to it. We got this experience Hex II. So I think it's certainly, if you take a look at Heretic and Hex, very similar, but definitely Hex II probably has a darker look to it. Heretic 2 really flipped the script, because we look at Heretic, Hexen 2, and Raven Software stuck with a first-person perspective, and then they decided to say, okay, hey, let's just switch this up, and they went with a third-person view. There were a lot of folks back then in 1998 when this game came out that were kind of put off by it, but if you take a look at the gameplay, it really reminds me a lot of other games similarly that we got to see on the Dreamcast. Games like Legacy of Kain, Soul Reaver, I think a little bit of Kiss Psycho Circus. We can definitely see a lot of those aesthetics, and I think definitely Heretic 2 would have been Hexen 2 would have been a fantastic addition to the system. So I think it definitely took the Quake engine, I think it brightened things up, and so certainly I think there would have been a place for it based upon the time and place that Dreamcast was more powerful enough to do great things, certainly with Quake-based engine games. Following this up, we see Might and Magic 9. So this was a game by New World Computing in 2002. It's a role-playing game that's built upon the Lithtech engine. So we saw other games with Lithtech engine, and we'll see more later. And so this is one that, even though it came out in 2002, certainly could have been one that could have been in development. Not saying that it was. I have no idea if there was any, but I think as far as there's nothing quite like it to really compare to. I know that we had a bit of a open online RPG with Phantasy Star Online, but it wasn't nearly as open. I think having a game like this with this sort of grand vistas, something almost Elder Scrolls like, I think would have been a great addition. Certainly it has more of a PC feel to it. This was not a game that came out on consoles. And then going a little further, 2001 was a game published by EA built upon the Unreal Engine. That's Clive Barker's Undying. So what I really like about this is that it's more of a first-person shooter / adventure that seems to have a lot more story elements to it. And certainly with Clive Barker behind it, you expect there to be more to it. A master of horror and suspense. So I think definitely it would have been a really interesting gameplay. I think graphically it's a gorgeous game built upon the Unreal Engine, and we were really blessed to have a great Unreal-based engine game with Unreal Tournament. With the short lifespan of the Dreamcast, we could potentially have seen further iterations, updates, to really show what the Dreamcast could do. But certainly we know that the Unreal Engine, based on Unreal Tournament, was able to be played on the Dreamcast. Now, could there have been more load times for a game like this? Certainly. This was a game that was, installed on hard drives on PCs, but we know definitely a game like this, I think, would have sold quite a few copies. And to follow this up was Ion Storm's 2000 masterpiece, Deus Ex. So I remember reading PC Gamer magazine back during this time and thinking to myself, gosh, this was a game that all the press was raving about. This was a game that was, multi-million seller, and was something that was really would have been a great game to add to the Dreamcast library. If there's something I look at as far as genres are underrepresented, it certainly would have been, first-person shooters and games with just simply utilizing that element in an adventure-type setting. And Deus Ex was one to where it decided to throw out the script. This wasn't supposedly just a shooter or necessarily a stealth action game like Thief. This is one to where you could win your objective by a variety of means, and certainly, these are kind of games that have seen multiple revisions and updates, based upon the fact that there's so many different ways to play. Modders in the PC community have taken this and gone with it so many different ways as far as improving graphics and gameplay. And looking at this, even though it's 2000, we know the Dreamcast had a great skill set as far as being able to make games look even better than what should be expected based upon what was under the hood. And it really comes down to, I think, just the great engineers that really knew how to make games really stand out. So, certainly, I really think this game could have been a huge seller for the Dreamcast, especially if it could have come out before the PlayStation 2 version. We happen to see on the Dreamcast and the PS2, oftentimes when games came out on both platforms, the Dreamcast version was superior. Not always the case, but certainly there were several cases where this appeared to be. So a lot of people think, Half-Life, whether or not the leak that was released was the final build or not, we're not too sure. But certainly Deus Ex, I think, would have been a huge seller. What do you think? Not to be outdone was another game built upon now the Quake 3 engine, and this is American McGee's Alice, which was developed by Rogue Entertainment in 2000. Now, if you're a fan of Xbox 360, PS3, we saw the sequel to American McGee's Alice. But certainly as far as this game was one that, yet again, reminds me a bit of just simply how utilizing these first-person shooter engines and creating a great third-person perspective gameplay, utilizing the technology really to a broader audience than simply saying, hey, it's a shooter engine, let's just use it for shooters. And I think this game had a lot of personality, and unfortunately EA just did not support the Dreamcast, so that's probably why we've never seen a game like this come out, but it would have been a good one. Another game based on the Quake 3 engine is yet again by Raven Software, we've heard a lot of, and that is Star Trek Voyager Elite Force. So, certainly we did not see any kind of Star Trek games on the Dreamcast. Certainly Star Trek has not been nearly as popular of a series, in the sci-fi universe and as far as gaming as well. Certainly we've had lots of Star Wars, but Star Trek's one that's definitely not had as much attention. We didn't see anything on the Sega Saturn as far as in this Star Trek universe. I think you had to go back to the Sega Genesis to actually get a Star Trek based game. But I think definitely looking at the graphics, I think it's very clean, very neat looking game. It's just possible that it's unfortunate that it probably wasn't a big enough market to advertise for a Star Trek game, but I would say that's not the case. We saw it come out on the PS2. And certainly, last but not least, is Green Matter Interactive Nerve Software's 2001 follow-up to yet another game in its software library, and this is Return to Castle Wolfenstein. So, this is a game series I think that's really blown up for the better over the last few years. Certainly current gen, we've seen 3 different releases in the Wolfenstein series. Now granted, the last one probably wasn't as popular, but people never get bored of playing in opportunities, first-person shooters, third-person shooters. If there's a chance to defeat Nazis, I think the gaming populace is probably all over that opportunity to do so. And I think definitely, this game, we know Quake 3 engine can run just fine on the Dreamcast. I think definitely with a little bit more time, we could have probably seen this game come out. I think a few things that have excited me about a release for this game on the system would have been seeing how the Dreamcast could have been utilized with online play. Certainly the Dreamcast was ahead of its time with regards to current gen systems. So we had seen as far as superior ports of Half-Life on the Dreamcast comparisons to PS2. Granted though, Half-Life wasn't officially released. It may have been an unfinished state for what was leaked. However, we know Unreal Tournament was very robust online, Quake 3 Arena as well. I think seeing what the Dreamcast could have done with this game, especially for online multiplayer, split screen, would have been interesting, as well as the opportunity for really interesting unlocks. So for instance, the PS2 version of this game, had some interesting options comparison to the PC. Same thing for the original Xbox. If you beat the game, you can get original Wolfenstein 3D. And I think that game, along with Spear of Destiny, would have been fantastic unlockables for the Dreamcast. Certainly, since it's more than capable of running the software, relatively robust enough, and certainly it's a classic first-person shooter. Even though it's definitely aged, it's still a lot of fun. If you've not played it, definitely recommend picking it up and taking it for a spin. I'm pretty sure that there is a homebrew port of this game for the Dreamcast. However, unfortunately, we'll never see Return to Castle Wolfenstein on the Dreamcast. Welcome back. So what do you think? Certainly I put the little gaming hermit to bed, and so I think definitely I think there were enough games there as far as for excitement that would definitely have woken him up and sort of gotten me excited as a gamer had I been able to see those and play those on our great little system, the Sega Dreamcast. So tell me what you think about the games that were on the video. Do you think that Dreamcast will be able to handle it? Do you think there'll be great additions to the library? Certainly, I'd love to read your comments. So if you got some positive or negative suggestions for the video, go ahead and leave a comment. If you liked what you saw, hey there, mister. Go ahead and say that, oh, your video stinks, and or go ahead and just share it with others. I'll catch you next week with another video. Thanks for stopping by, and have the little gaming hermit say goodbye. Bye, everybody.